The recent Yu-Gi-Oh ban list may have taken away Yugioh and Kelbeck, two incredible cards for the Tearlaments strategy. However, that does not stop us true Tearlaments copers. This is why I created the Tearlaments Encyclopedia. The goal of this video is to teach you every single thing we currently know about Tearlaments. What is the main engine looking like? What other sub-engines are out there? Which ones are the best, when and why? What other weird decks are out there? Which cards are coming up that can completely even change the deck? So first, the basics. What is Tearlaments? Tearlaments is a graveyard-based strategy, focusing on sending cards from the deck to the graveyard and then getting value from these mills. When Hafnis, Sharon or Merly is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, they will then fusion summon with other material from the grave, hand or field, creating very powerful fusion monsters and other incredible plays. First, let's look at the strengths. The end boards that Tearlaments can make are pseudo FTKs. Even with Yugioh and Kelbeck banned, the final board that Tearlaments can technically put up is basically something no deck on the planet can play through. Even combinations of really powerful board breakers like Dark Ruler No More, Super Polymerization, Triple Tactics Talents and so forth are not enough to break it. So you really have to just hand trap them into oblivion to stop those boards from happening. Secondly, they can also play more of a slower grindy game. They can make a minimal board of a couple pieces of interruption while still having solid follow-up and then just win that way. Another strength is that it's very layered disruption. Like I alluded to earlier, you can't just activate the Dark Ruler No More and go, oh, okay, guess the board is gone, because there might be interaction in the graveyard, there might be a trap, there might be interaction from the hand, there might be interaction from the field spell, and so there's no one-size-fits-all approach to really deal with the Tearlaments board. Another strength is that the opponent can't really calculate what will happen when they start playing into the board. Since this deck will mill on the opponent's turn, random things could happen that you couldn't foresee. And the final strength of Tearlaments is that the best hate card against it is a card that not every deck can play, and that is Dimension Shifter. So while Dimension Shifter obviously turns off the entire Tearlaments deck, it also turns off most other decks. Popular decks that can, however, play Dimension Shifter and not really care are Kashtira, Fluanderies, and Exosister. And so these three decks are also going to be some of our worst matchups. Now for the Tearlaments weaknesses. First, there's still some randomness here. You could simply not mill a single good card, maybe draw one too many bricks, and then the deck just falls apart. There is almost nothing you can do to completely fix this issue. This is not like a typical deck where you go normal summon Airlifter and get your full combo. Sometimes you will have the God Hand and nothing will still happen, depending of course on which type of Tearlaments deck you're playing. Because yes, there are actually Tearlaments decks with confirmed end boards and confirmed combos. More on that later. Second, and this is the biggest issue with Tearlaments, there is almost no room for non-engine, otherwise known as board breakers, hand traps, and so forth. This deck needs so many pieces, both in the hand, in the graveyard. Its mills need to be good, and so if you start diluting those good mills and good starters and extenders with stuff like Ash and Super Poly, Nibiru, and so forth, the deck just falls apart too often. This is why you will usually see Tearlaments decks stopping with 3 non-engine slots or 6 maximum, and usually even less than that. The problem with that is that this means Tearlaments needs to break full boards backed up by non-engine almost every time. Where other decks can maybe use an Ash and a Veiler to make the opponent's board very manageable, Tearlaments always needs to look at just this mountain of insane amounts of interruption, and if they then back up that board with maybe an Ash plus a Droll and so forth, this can make those boards completely unbreakable. Next, let's talk about the Tearlaments deck. This is the main engine you can expect in almost every tier deck after the ban list. So if you're starting to build your own Tearlaments deck, you should consider just starting with these cards. Is it possible you want to reduce one Scream? Maybe. Is it possible you want to reduce one good? Maybe. But I personally wouldn't recommend it because we are really hurting for starters ever since the Kelbeck and Yugioh bans. So when in doubt, start with these 20 and build from there. Similar story for the extra deck. These are the couple cards that you're gonna find in almost every single list. Kaleido Heart is our easiest slash most versatile disruption. Mud Dragon brings our other fusions back in and out of rotation. Dragostapelia means you almost always have a fusion summon to do on your opponent's turn. Time Thief Redoer might be one some people try to cut, but you will notice the more you play this deck, the more there will be weird situations where he comes up and he's the only way to keep plays going. Then there's Bahamut Shark and Totally Awesome. Essentially what you will do is you will overlay a Rhino Heart together with a Mud Dragon, or perhaps a Rhino Heart plus another Rhino Heart to make Bahamut activate its effect and summon a Totally Awesome. This is one of Tearlaments' best plays because it is also a confirmed play. This is something that isn't entirely reliant on randomness, and having that confirmed Omni Negate is just incredible. Beyond that, after you use Toad, it can then add back a Tearlaments Kashtira or a Rhino Heart from the graveyard to your hand, so you have even more follow-up. A neat little trick that not many people are aware of is that you can also use this to extend through a Drollen Lockbird. Sometimes you can go Bahamut Shark, make it Totally Awesome, and then instantly link those two away into a Sprint. Then Sprint can send Merly from the deck to the graveyard, and Toad adds back a Tearlament Kashtira from the graveyard. Then the Merly can fusion summon, and the Toad in the graveyard is an Aqua, so if you then have a Rhino Heart in grave already, this is an easy Kaleido Heart. But if you have a Mud Dragon, because that's how you often make Bahamut Shark, the Merly plus the Mud Dragon can also make a Dragostapelia. Then this added back Tearlament Kashtira, which you got from the Toad effect, can then be another summon and so forth. So this little trick is something I don't see a lot of Tearlaments players actually use, but it is absolutely crucial to have in your toolbox. Finally, for links, we have Dark and SP Little Knight. SP Little Knight, of course, is a broken generic card. It really helps Tearlaments push through boards, especially because we have so many ways to summon from our extra deck. It is very hard for us not to have the fodder required for SP Little Knight to also banish. And Dark is just so important. It gives us SP Little Knight plays, it gives us Sprint plays, which is very important. And so I would rather be caught dead than having a Tearlaments deck without these in my extra deck. Now, of course, there's a bunch of other cards that we will be putting in this extra deck, depending on some of the other engines we add to this. But again, this is just a skeleton. You start from this in your main and extra, and then you build from there. Next, let's talk about fusion material. As you know, whenever our 3 fusion ladies are sent by effect to the graveyard, they will fusion summon. But you need more monsters to fusion summon stuff. Back in the good old days, when we had Kit Kalos, this was very easy. You always had enough material for this. But these days, you're gonna have to put in a little more work. The most popular options are, first of all, Destiny Heroes. You would have Destiny Hero Malicious or Denier, and these, together with a tier name, would make Destiny Hero Dangerous. This is a level 6 fusion that says you can discard something from your hand and then send a Destiny Hero from the deck to the graveyard. This means when you fusion summon with Malicious and a name, you make the Dangerous, then you discard something, Dangerous sends Malicious back to the graveyard, and then you banish the Malicious, summoning a new Malicious, and then you get to overlay the Dangerous plus the Malicious into Beatrice. This means fusion summoning one Dangerous always equals a Beatrice, which is of course an incredible card because it allows you to mill specific cards from the deck. This means it can either send another name to start fusing, it can send Scream to search for a trap, it can search a trap to search for a tier name, it can search Terrific Karma to search for Perlerino or any spell or trap that's in the Tearlaments archetype basically. You could send a Shuffler or a variety of cards. Beatrice can send anything in the game, and even some spicy new text, but more on that later. However, there are other fusion materials. You don't necessarily need to play Destiny Hero. Another very popular type of fusion material is King of the Swamp. This card says it can substitute the name of anything for fusion summoning. This means it can be Kit Kalos when you're trying to make Rule Kalos, it can be the Grafa for the Dark World fusion, which is an Omni Negate, it can be Cartesia for Grand Guignol, and so much more. The most popular fusions you'll be making with the Swamp Boys are Rulkalos and Grafa, but there are other options, so feel free to experiment. Now within this Swamp category, there's actually another division, but once again, I'll explain that later. Other popular fusion material is Dangers. Now these won't be making any broken specific fusions, but they are dark, and then they have some very important typing. Nessie is an Aqua, meaning you can make Garura, while the others are anything but Aqua, meaning you can make Mud Dragon. So this is why you see some people play like 1 Danger Nessie and 1 Danger Mothman, or 2 Danger Nessie and 1 Jackalope, which is something you saw me do in my top 8 WCQ Tearlaments profile. And then finally we also have Shaddolls. Shaddolls also have effects when milled to the graveyard, but they can also be used to fusion summon into powerful cards like Shaddol Winda. Really the 4 main categories are Destiny Heroes, Swampy Boys, Dangers, and Shaddolls. Next we have non-engine. Like I was saying earlier, we don't have a lot of room for it. After the ban list, you're probably gonna have like 3 non-engine slots, and then the rest will be in your side deck. Of course, it's also gonna be important, but I don't want to spend too much energy on this specific section because this will change from meta to meta. Super Poly might be really good, but then after a new set comes out, Ash might be really good or Droll might be really good. And so I don't really want to tell you, oh, play this right now, when that could be outdated very soon. Whereas the other information here will actually stay very relevant in my opinion. That said, there are 4 categories I want to talk about. First of all, there's Super Polymerization. Now, Super Polymerization is extra good in Tearlaments for 2 reasons. First of all, Tearlaments plays quite a number of bricks or cards that are actually really good in the graveyard. So when you use your non-engine to also fuel the graveyard, that is extra good. But the second reason is more important, and that is the best targets for Super Poly are generally Mud Dragon and Garura, which are 2 monsters that we were already playing in our extra deck anyway. So it doesn't cost us anything to include Super Poly, unlike other decks. Next we have Tactics or board breakers like that. In general, I prefer board breakers in Tearlaments because we can't play that many. You have to imagine if you're sitting in front of an opponent and that opponent is going to go off with a crazy combo, do you want 1 little hand trap or 1 board breaker? Usually a hand trap is not really enough to stop the board from happening, and so a board breaker is often just simply going to be better. But again, it might depend on the format. Some formats this might not be the case. Personally, I also prefer Tactics in this slot because it can also be a going first card. If we get ashed on a very crucial point, being able to go Tactics, draw 2 cards and get more gas that way can be exactly what you need to not have your deck completely shit to bed. The third category is of course hand traps, and depending on the format those might be really good. And the final category, and you might be thinking, huh, haven't we gone over all of them? No, the final category is stealing cards. Any card that says take an opponent's monster, whether it be Change of Heart, Mind Control, Snatch, Steal, and Tactics itself really. Now why is this better in Tearlaments than in other decks? It's because some of the Tearlaments lists are playing Zombie Vampire. Zombie Vampire sends 4 cards from the deck to the graveyard, and so it really synergizes really well with Tearlaments. But one often overlooked line on Zombie Vampire is that any monster you use from your opponent to make Zombie Vampire is treated as a level 8. This means when you use Dark to grab a monster from your opponent's graveyard, and then you activate a steal card like Change of Heart to grab a monster from your opponent's field, you can overlay these 2, no matter what they are, to make Zombie Vampire and start milling. So when you're building your side deck and you notice, damn, I'm missing some cards I want to put in here, I don't really know for sure, and you're already playing Zombie Vampire, steal cards can be extra good in Tearlaments because not only will they help you break the board, they will also help you get your own engine started, which is very different from other decks. Finally, let's talk about the supporting engines you can play in Tearlaments, and these are going to be the most important. These are going to be the difference between how random is your deck, how often can your deck combo, how well does your deck do going second, what kind of extra deck are you going to be playing. All of these questions are defined by which supporting engine you are playing. The ban list was really rough on Tearlaments the past few go-arounds, and so we don't have that many Tearlaments cards left. We're gonna need some other engines to keep us going. The first supporting engine that of course everyone is talking about right now is the Horus cards. By the way, check out this beautiful playmat. You can get it at zerodamagegaming.com. So we have the Horus cards right here. This is the smallest form of the engine you can play. We have 3 Imseti, 1 Sark, and 1 Happy. You will notice some people play an even bigger package. Often they will try to play 2 King Sarcophagus or maybe even 3. Some people will go even crazier and start adding more names as well. They might play something like the Duamatev. Now, one little thing I do want to say, if you are starting to play other Horus names, in my opinion, you should be going for the weaker Earth one rather than the water one. The reason for that is that if your opponent manages to steal the water one, whether with enemy controller or maybe Rescue Ace uses the rescue card, if they can do that within a chain, you might randomly lose on the spot. And it's not an effect that you're generally gonna be able to use yourself anyway because of how the deck functions. So there's really only downsides to playing the water one. Bit of a hot take, you do with that what you will. Now the Horus engine is incredible, of course, because it does 2 things. It will discard garbage from your hand, which you might want to have in your graveyard, and then it is a really easy way to make zombie vampire. Again, you will see this in the test hands later, but whenever you open something like Imseti plus a Trivic Karma or Imseti plus something you want to be fusing with, and then you resolve a zombie vampire, you're gonna be very, very happy. Now the next engine I want to talk about is one that actually almost no one is talking about. I brought up this engine in the Tearlaments Discord a while ago and said, I think after the ban list, this will be crazy. And a bunch of people were laughing at me. However, the wind has turned and now quite some people are actually trying out this really fun engine, and that is the punks. I actually think that the punks are sometimes better than Horus cards in Tearlaments, which is crazy, but let me explain. So the punk engine consists of Xiamin, Deer Node, Foxy Tune, and then ideally, of course, Emergency Teleport. Now this is the smallest punk engine you can play, but I would personally tell you to play one more card, and that is another copy of Xiamin. This punk engine is, in my opinion, the ideal way to play punk Tearlaments right now. But why would you play punk Tearlaments? If you compare it to something like Horus, both are trying to do the same thing. You're trying to make a zombie vampire. That's really all these engines do on turn 1. More on that later. You're trying to get that zombie vampire, get that sweet, sweet MILF 4, and then go off from there. Now, when it comes to plays like that, Punk is actually far better than Horus. Let's check out an example. Let's say you activate Emergency Teleport, you special summon Xiamin, then Xiamin activates its effect and searches a Foxy Tune. Now, Foxy Tune says it will discard itself for cost, and then, if it doesn't get hand trapped, you send another card from your hand to the graveyard for effect. After that, it special summons Deer Node. Now this for effect part is very, very important because Imseti on the Horus engine discards for cost. This means if you go discard Imseti with another card and they ash, you just went -2. However, if you go Emergency Teleport, get a Xiamin, search a Foxy Tune, discard Foxy Tune, and they ash there, you only went -1 from hand, but you still have this Xiamin on the board ready to be used for other summons and so forth. Beyond that, because it sends for effect, it is also triggering our other cards. It is triggering Tearlaments names. It is triggering Scream to search a trap. It is triggering Sulik to search a monster. It is triggering Shadols if you're playing Shadol Beast and so forth. So Foxy Tune is strictly better than Imseti in terms of discard. We get our Deer Node play true, so now we have these two. Together, they will make Diabolantis. Now, Deer Node will activate and summon back our Foxy Tune, while Diabolantis will send Fusion Parasite from the deck to the graveyard. Now, Fusion Parasite, just like King of the Swamp, says that it can substitute any name in a fusion summon. This means you now have 2 level 8s and a fusion substitute ready to be used for a fusion summon. Whereas if you just use the Horus engine, you only rely on the 4 mills from Zombie Vampire, and they better contain something to fuse with, because otherwise you're fusing with not much, you know, just the Imseti is a dark, you can make a Mud Dragon, but that's all. Whereas here, you know, if a fusion name is resolving, I'm getting a Rule Colossus or a Grafa. And if you think, oh, but I really want the dark Imseti, maybe that will get me to a Mud Dragon to make a Bahamut to make a Toad, you can still overlay these for Zombie Vampire, activate Zombie Vampire, send Diabolantis, and now you also have the dark in your graveyard. Now let's say they hand trap earlier. Let's say you go Emergency Teleport and they go Ash. Okay, cool. You only wasted one card rather than two like with Imseti. If you go Emergency Teleport, summon Zeamin, and they activate Imperm, again, you've only wasted one card and you still have this body to summon with. Now there's another argument for why this engine can in some ways be better than Horus, and that is that the amount of bad cards you are playing versus good ones is very, very different. If you are playing this engine, you have 3 incredible cards to open. Teleport is insane. You have 2 good cards to open because Zeamin by itself is still combo, you're just using your normal summon. You have 1 okay card to open because this can still get garbage out of your hand, still gets you a level 3 tuner with which you can then make Baron later, and then 1 awful card to open, like Dear Note. Now compare that to Horus. You have 3 incredible cards to open, Imseti, 1 or 2 or 3 weaker cards to open, King Sark, because whenever you use your Sarcophagus to discard your entire hand, and then they hand trap the zombie vampire, you've lost on the spot. So King Sark, while being a good draw, is not that good of a draw. And then you have 1 awful draw, Happy, which is just the same as Dear Note. So in terms of good and great draws versus bad draws, the Punk engine is much better than Horus. Another thing this engine can do is combine with some of the other cards you're already running. If you're choosing to play Fenrir, this combines great with Punk cards because you can go Special Summon Fenrir, activate Teleport, Special Summon Zeamin. Zeamin effect gets you Foxy Tune. You do this way so that if they droll you, you still have the full zombie vampire line, which is worth way more in my opinion than the Kashtira Fenrir into Tier Cache line. Then you activate Fenrir, searching Tier Cache, so this is your hand, this is your field. And now, let's say you're playing against Dragon Link, so you know they have a bunch of Bestials. You can still choose to activate Foxy Tune, send something else to the graveyard, Special Summon Dear Note, link these off into Diabolantis, then Diabolantis sends you your Fusion Parasite, and the Dear Note brings back the Zeamin. Now, the Zeamin and the Fenrir overlay into Baron, and then the Tier Cache is special summoned out, and all of your mills are insulated from Bestials because you have the Baron protection right here. Now, if you know you're gonna do a line like this, you might also, rather than making the Diabolantis, make another level 8 synchro, and that is Dragite. Dragite is a spell and trap negate, but it's only live when you have a water monster in the graveyard. Now, because Tearlaments is full of water monsters, especially the Swamp build and Tier Cache and Rhinoheart and so forth, this is basically a confirmed Omni negate and a confirmed spell and trap negate, and you still have to do all of your other mill plays. So this is another angle as to why Punk can be very interesting. Now, I've been hyping up Punks quite a bit, and you might be wondering, what the hell is up? What's your angle? Let me be clear, Punks also have some drawbacks, and let's talk about those. One thing you will notice instantly is the size of the engine. So when we play triple teleport, and we're playing 2 Zeamin, and we're playing Foxy and Dear Note, this is 7 cards right here. Meanwhile, the Horus engine, we have Imseti, we have Sark Happy, that is 5. That is 2 cards less. Now, some people might make this engine bigger by adding King Sarks, and then they might end up being the same-ish, but still, this means we have less room for good mills. And beyond that, you will also notice Imseti is a dark. This means it can be an okay mill. You can still fusion summon with this. Meanwhile, if you start milling Punk cards, they're dead mills. They don't do anything in the graveyard. They are basically great draws and really shit mills, while Horus are great draws and alright mills. However, I do not think the mill argument is actually what pushes Horus potentially over the edge. I think the main argument is actually King Sark as follow-up. Because Tearlaments are now building slightly weaker boards, sometimes our board will not be a FTK after some hand traps. This means if your opponent then is using very little cards to still play through whatever is left there, they're probably not instantly winning on the spot either. If you are then able to start your turn with Summon back Imseti, Summon back Happy, that is probably where you win, that follow-up. This is something the Punk cards do not have at all. The Punk cards don't generate anything except for that zombie vampire and that fusion parasite. And this is why Horus, in my opinion, is currently slightly better than Punk. But not actually by that much. And there are definitely days where I'm like, fuck these Horus cards, these Punks are where it's at. They're actually extremely close in my opinion, way more close than people are giving it credit for. But that said, I am currently on the Horus build, but I was on Punk for quite a bit, and I wouldn't look down on this too much. Also, if you're on a budget, if you think, damn, these Horus cards are very expensive, Punks are dirt cheap. You don't have to buy the beautiful ultis right here, though. Oh, look at that beauty. But you don't have to do that. You can get these cards for a couple cents, and then if you don't have the money for Horus, you know, cool, you can still play Tearlaments at a very high power level in my opinion. Another neat thing about the Punks is that if you open with 2 teleports or something like that, you can also use the extra Zeamin to just make a free Baron somewhere in your combo. You can just do the zombie vampire plays and then synchro a tier cache plus the final Zeamin into a Baron, bada bing bada boom. You have some free Omni negation on top of that. The next supporting engine is the Dangers. So the smallest danger engine you can play is Nessie plus Mothman, or Nessie plus the little snake. Also check out this beautiful playmat at zerodamagegaming.com. You can use the code Solemn for a discount. Personally, I love the Chukinoko kind way more. Now you might say the level of Chukinoko sucks, and I agree. Generally, we are playing level 4 XCs like Redoer or Dweller, and so Mothman is way better for that. Also, you might be playing Destrudo, and Mothman is a level 4 to make Destrudo level 3. Way better, right? So in terms of level, Mothman wins. However, in terms of being in your hand, in my opinion, Chukinoko is much better. Whenever you hit Mothman with its own effect, you are basically giving your opponent the option to draw into a hand trap to obliterate you, whereas Chukinoko will always just be a free body. Whenever you are playing with other cards, because your hand was really good, you will notice, damn, I'm through my combo now, and I only have this one danger left in my hand. So if it's Chukinoko, cool, this is a free body, it might make an IP or an SP or something like that. Whereas Mothman is just gonna be like, alright, am I gonna give my opponent a free upstart goblin right here? God, no. So then it's just stuck in your hand. In terms of top decking, Mothman is also awful. However, again, it is the better level. But so this is the tiniest danger engine you will see some people play. However, you can make the engine bigger. So one thing I was doing, if you check out my top 8 WCQ Tearlaments deck profile, you will notice I was playing 2 Danger Nessie and 1 Jackalope without a Mothman. This means that if you have to start playing with Dangers, you can go activate Nessie, and if it hits itself, it gets a Jackalope, and then if that hits itself, you know, if everything goes wrong, you can at least still have a Nessie from the deck on the field, which is still a level 7. It's gonna help you make the Strudo Baron plays. Worst case, you're just gonna link it off, and of course, it's also an Aqua for Kaleido Heart. So this, in my opinion, is like an ideal smaller package. However, I've also seen people have great success with just Nessie, and the Mothman like that. However, it doesn't actually have to stop there. If we are moving in a format where there's not a lot of draw, and this of course depends, I think next format we will have a lot of draw, but if it's a format without a lot of draw, nothing stops us from having a gigantic danger package. Kind of like we saw at the European Championship 2 years ago. We saw people playing Tearlaments Danger, and those packages were massive. So we could have something like triple Nessie together with a Jackalope, together with a Chukinoko, together with a Mothman. Maybe we go crazy and add a Bigfoot, which is great going second. Maybe we can go even crazier. We might add a Greffer, because if you open like Nessie plus Greffer, then you do all kinds of extra plays. You could even see a Zephyros, because this is also incredible with Dangers. Again, this is very format dependent. It depends on, you know, what the ban list has been doing to us. I think as more and more of our favorite cards and engines get hit, we start moving towards older things that we already know works. And this is once again another option. Also depends on your budget. Maybe you already have these cards lying around and you don't have Horus and stuff like that. This allows you to still play Tearlaments relatively pure, if you can call it that. And of course, whenever you are using Dangers and you send something like a Scream to the graveyard, something like a Sulik to the graveyard, something like a Name to the graveyard, they will all trigger and get their effects. So that's another option. But of course, right now, you will notice in all of the lists that I will be showing you very soon, I'm usually playing a small Danger package. So not this big one. It's still something that I wanted to highlight because it's an option, but you will usually notice me doing something along the lines of either this or maybe something like this. But again, you can experiment. You can also just, you know, play the Mothman if that's something you like. Now, the next supporting engine is one that is less random. That's right. We've been talking about all of these supporting engines that are great if you want to keep those Tearlaments plays the strongest. You know, you want to be milling with Zombie Vampire, or you want to activate all those tier cards from your hand with the Dangers. But what if you want confirmed plays? This is when you add the Kashtira Engine. This is a build we saw do well in the OCG when Tearlaments was first getting hit. What this will basically do is, first of all, if your opponent is going to be hand trapping you, they are going to be losing their extra deck. And because Kashtira is not a major threat in the meta right now, not a lot of people are playing doubles of their most important card. Maybe back in the day people were playing 2 Zeus, but right now they aren't, so Unicorn will start picking away at those extra decks. But then most importantly, you will get access to Kashtira Birth. And Kashtira Birth is actually super powerful in Tearlaments because it means suddenly any Kashtira card you mill is now a good mill. Where previously Kashtira Fenrir was a dead mill, it is now one of the most powerful mills imaginable. Imagine you go special summon Unicorn, activate Birth, activate Tearlaments Sharon, mill 3, there's a Fenrir in there. Awesome. You then activate Birth to bring back the Fenrir, activate Fenrir to search the tier cache, and then the tier cache mills, and so forth. This is a whole new layer of extension inside this deck that makes certain bad mills incredible mills. And also, it allows us to play true things like Dimension Shifter and Abyss Dweller way better. Finally, Kashtira Birth is also a really powerful interruption. Again, not a lot of decks right now are prepared for interrupts when the main deck that was using it before, Kashtira, is no longer considered the best deck in the format. So they activate some spells, you start banishing stuff face down, and you're off to the races. Another neat trick you can do is if your mills then go bad and you start getting stuck on Kashtira cards, you can overlay them into Shangri-Ira, and then this Shangri-Ira in the next standby phase can special summon a Tearlaments Kashtira, milling 3 more cards. This way, you have one more shot at milling into a bigger board on your opponent's turn. Beyond that, Kashtira cards are also very good at going second, and again I want to highlight these Kashtira plays aren't as random as the Tearlaments strategy may sometimes be. When you summon a Fenrir or a Unicorn, there's gonna be a Fenrir or a Unicorn, whether your Sharon mills miss or not. One thing I also love doing with this engine is playing Big Eye. This is something not a lot of people are doing for some reason, and for the life of me, I don't understand why. I mean, if you're playing Kashtira together with Danger Nessie, that is even more level 7s, and so you can play Big Eye all the damn time. Big Eye also became an even better going second card thanks to SP Little Knight, because you can go like Unicorn, Fenrir, then Fenrir at one point will banish something face down, you will overlay your Unicorn and your Fenrir into Big Eye, you will grab a monster, then that monster plus that Big Eye will make an SP, that SP will banish another thing. You are really picking apart the board with just confirmed Kashtira plays inside your Tearlaments deck. And note, yes, I will be giving you example decks of all of these beautiful engines very shortly. The next supporting engine is the Synchro Engine, because yes, there are quite some Synchro plays we can do, and once again, these aren't random. So if you want a Tearlaments deck with some more confirmed plays, have a look. So the confirmed Synchro plays are really all about Visas Amritara. The fact that Visas Amritara says search for any spell or trap that mentions Visas Starfrost means it can search any Tearlaments card, Crime, Meta Noise, all of these cards mention Visas in their text, and so Visas Amritara can just search them. And that includes the field spell Perlerino. So if you open a level 4 plus a Revolution Synchron, you can actually normal summon the level 4, use Revolution Synchron's effect from the hand to go into an Ancient Fairy Dragon, then activate Revolution from the graveyard to mill 1, which is a mill, great for the deck, bring it back as a level 1, then this 7 and this 1, go into Amritara, and Amritara searches Perlerino. Now your Perlerino suddenly, you know, does all of your tier plays. If you already have Perlerino, this could also search you your Sulik or your Scream or anything else like that. Now, this play, while cool, and it does give you some confirmed plays, which is very useful, also gets better with Kashtira cards, because if you opened Wraith Salt and you then do your Ancient Fairy Dragon play, you can actually destroy the Wraith Salt to add a Perlerino from deck to hand, and then when you do this Amritara play, you can now search for something else. But that is still not why I actually think Revolution Synchron is really solid. The play I actually love this Revolution Synchron for so much is that you can go special summon Fenrir, add a tier cache to your hand, Revolution Synchron, then you synchro these off into a Baron, and now you're already safe from Bestials and Bells and all of that. Then you activate Revolution Synchron to bring it back and mill 1, again again, milling is great for our deck. Then we can banish the Kashtira Fenrir to special summon a Tearlaments Kashtira, milling 3, again, milling is great for our deck. And then this 7 and this now level 1 make a Dragite, and again, we now have the water in our graveyard. So now we have a Omni negate and a Spell and Trap negate, confirmed out of nowhere. And now all our other cards in our hand, whether it's Pearl Rhino, Scream, Sharon, and all of that stuff, can just pop off like crazy. So you have confirmed 2 incredible interrupts, and you've not even activated the random part of Tearlaments just yet. So this is my personal reason for really liking the Revolution Synchron build, or well, the Synchro build in general. Yes, the other confirmed plays are cool, but just this combination is nasty. Now, people have done some other stuff with the Synchro build. They've tried Assault Synchron to use the Vanadium Trisukta into Amritara. They've tried Visa Starfrost, Samsara, and so forth. We'll talk about that a little more later, but the Synchro stuff is interesting. However, in my opinion, it does have the issue that it plays into Droll a little more, just like Vanadium basically, but then without a non-engine that Vanadium can play. So where if Vanadium gets Drolled, there's a chance they can still hand trap their opponent and that way get another turn through the Droll. Tearlaments doesn't really have that. So that's kind of like a thing you have to keep in mind. That's why, in my opinion, the Synchro build is a little weaker than the other ones, but it's still pretty cool. It's still something I like experimenting with. Now let's go over some of the build options people have been discussing. The first biggest discussion we've probably seen in the Tearlaments communities the past few months is Destiny Hero versus Swamp. So on the one hand, we have the Destiny Hero package with Dangerous making Beatrice, which gives you confirmed mills with the Beatrice. And then you have people playing the Swamp cards because they can give you more powerful fusion summons like Rulkalos and Grafa. I'm not here to say one is much better than the other. I'm just gonna give you some of the pros and cons. Now, the pros for the Mali Denier build is that even when you're not fusion summoning, Mali can still be a great mill. It can still just be an extra body to link summon with, link climb with, break boards that way. Or if you've maybe already made a Garura with a Nessie in a name, then being able to just special summon a Mali by banishing from grave, overlaying into Beatrice that way for free basically. You didn't even have to make it dangerous. You get a free draw by attaching the Garura, you get a free mill from the Beatrice that way. You might even do some of the Denier plays, shuffle back the Malicious that way, get even more special summons, do Dark and SP plays. All of that is really cool. There's also some really cool cards coming out soon that makes Beatrice even more broken. I will go over that later, but it rhymes with Ban Snackchen Bowl Snack. However, the issue I have with a D-Hero build is that when you're going second and you're trying to break a board, whenever you do get to fusion summon, your fusion summons suck. Making a Mud Dragon or a Dangerous with a Malicious really puts no pressure. This is just a free body, you know? So you mill a Hofnis and you go, whoa, I get to fusion summon. Your opponent is like, oh no, they're gonna fusion summon, and they make a Dangerous. Who cares? It doesn't really do anything. However, if you are playing a Swamp build and it's, oh, you mill a Hofnis, they're gonna fusion summon. Oh no, they're gonna fusion summon, and it is Grafa G. Into the Rescue Ace board, summoning a Grafa instantly trades with the 2 traps. Now you could say, oh, but you can make a Mud Dragon with Malicious, and this also trades with the 2 Rescue Ace traps. The reality of the situation though is that Mud Dragon is only protecting your waters, and now you still have to do other plays while trying to break the board, while that Mud Dragon is being kept hostage there. And so the second you start playing with Darks, well, they'll nuke them, and the second you turn your Mud Dragon into Dark, they can start nuking your waters. While Mud Dragon, in theory, breaks the Rescue Ace board, it doesn't really do it for tier. It mostly does it inside fire decks because they only have 1 attribute. So in general, just breaking boards with D-Heroes, I feel, is a little bit harder in the fusion summon department. Beyond that, if Nibiru is a big hand trap, Malicious builds kinda struggle. You can sometimes make an early totally awesome, but sometimes you also cannot. And then you just summon the Dangerous, you summon the second level 6, you already have some other plays you committed, they go Nibiru, and 80% of your board is gone. You might still have like 1 fusion summon with Sharon, but generally that's not really enough. Whereas if you're playing the Swamp build and you're making a Rulkalos early, nice Nibiru buddy, GG. That said, since we're now reliant on random mills and we're not really Agido Kelbecking to mill 5 quite as much anymore, sometimes a specific mill from Beatrice might be nice. But on the flip side, no longer being able to send Agido or Kelbeck from Beatrice also kind of hurts. That said, Destiny Heroes can also make Pilgrim Reaper instead of Beatrice, and then they have the mill 5 again. But so that's another argument pro Destiny Hero, assuming you have the extra deck space. So those are just some thoughts here, and then you can choose whether you want to play Destiny Hero or Swamp or both, if you can fit him. The next argument, and this one might be a little more interesting, is King of the Swamp versus Beast King of the Swamp. Now, King of the Swamp is awesome because it can be discarded to search a polymerization, and with this polymerization, you can then make a Guardian Chimera, which is just an incredible way to break a board. Now, the issue with this play is that it plays really hard into Droll. If you go King of the Swamp to search for a poly and they Droll there, the Guardian Chimera play is dead, and all your other plays are also dead. Now, of course, you can always start with the Perlerine and then they Droll there, but then you can no longer search for the poly even. So in general, this is really bad into Droll. And then it's also a question if your Guardian Chimera play is even gonna resolve. Do you have the correct amount of monsters? Are you going second into a deck that will allow you to have the bodies on field required for a Guardian Chimera summon? All of these are questions that make it to where you're not really making Guardian Chimera quite as often as you may like. But again, depending on what the format looks like, the Guardian Chimera play might be really impactful and coming up all the time, or it might be really shit and not really coming up at all. Back in the YCS Bologna meta, for example, for me, the Guardian Chimera play wasn't really coming up much because I was expecting Pearly, I was expecting Unchained, which can really stop the play with Escape, but if the ban list made the meta shift, then maybe the Guardian Chimera play is really awesome again. Now, the pro for Beast King previously was people were trying to use it in the Synchro build because it's a level 4, which pairs really well with Revolution Synchron because that's a level 3, and then together they make Ancient Fairy Dragon. However, why I was playing Beast King, again in my profile from the WCQ, is because it's level 4 in water. This means you can normal summon it and overlay it with a Rhino Heart that you special summoned with its effect in order to make a Bahamut Shark and go into totally awesome that way. I wasn't trying to play the Polymerization Guardian Chimera play anyway, so if I can then choose the correct level to make that Bahamut play, that is awesome. You can also just normal summon it in general to overlay for a Redoer with a Sharon, or maybe even just make Dweller. The level 4 also comes up to fix Destrudo's level to 3 to then make a Baron play. And so in general, while Beast King is cute in the Synchro build or that little Revolution Synchro synergy, it is also just a really cool level for the Bahamut plays and so forth. This is why I personally have been on Beast King for a while now. So those are the pros and cons of Beast King and regular King, and then it just depends on how you want to build your deck. Now let's go over some example deck lists for you to try out. Of course, you can change these however you like. I'll just give you a guideline and then you can go from there. So this is my tier Horus Beast King list right here. As you can see, the top lane really stayed the same. I added the Destrudo because I really love the Baron line right here. I'm playing triple goods and one terraforming even though terraforming kind of plays into Droll, I don't really like it. We are desperate for starters. You really got to consider that Tearlaments has multiple pushes through hand traps and through boards. And so whenever you only open one push, it's really hard to go second. Whereas if you are opening combinations like Fenrir, Goods, Perler Rhino, Horus, and so forth, the odds of your mills coming true at one point and then snowballing from there are much greater. This is why I'm on triple goods. Also, because of the Horus engine, the odds of me breaking on 2 goods and not being able to discard it is like pretty low. So this is why I'm fine with it. But if this is too much for you, feel free to experiment and put other cards in. Now on Beast King and on the small danger package, the reason I'm still playing some dangers is because I will sometimes side out the Horus cards and then I still need cards to fuse with. This is something very important you need to keep in mind when you're playing Horus. If you plan to side them out, be sure that there's still other darks in your deck to fusion summon with. Then Fenrir is not really non-engine in my opinion, but some people do consider it that way. And of course, we play the tactics as our non-engine because whenever they Ajim Seti, being able to go tactics and then either check their hand if we can still play or draw 2 if we can't play is really solid. For the side deck, again, this depends on the format, so you don't really have to think about this too much. For the extra, you notice we are playing the Rule Colossus and the Grafa. For the Beast King, we are playing the Redoer because it does come up personally. Bahamut Shark and Toad for that confirmed play. And then we are just playing the most generic links. I really like IP Masquerena personally because whenever we get hand trapped into Oblivion, we can usually still end on something like Fenrir IP. And against a lot of decks, that is really enough. You know, they already went -2 or maybe even 3 with hand traps and you still ending on Fenrir IP, that is nasty. So for that reason, still having that, I really like it. Now you might notice this list does not have shufflers. Well, I love the shufflers, of course, as an interrupt, but I'm noticing I'm breaking on them very often. Now that they can no longer send Kelbeck or Agido from the hand, I'm just kind of breaking on them. I don't really like it. You could side them in maybe for certain matchups, cut maybe a Shadow Beast or something, maybe a Terraforming. But I don't know, it just, I went to a locals with it, and my only losses really were having cards like Trivic Karma, Beast King, Mudora, Keldo, back then also Squamata in my hand. And so these cards just clogging and going, oh, I can't even play, you know, ruined my night. And so that's why they're not in the list. Next, we have the Tier Horus Destiny Hero variant. Again, the major change you see here is that we are playing the Malicious and the Denier. We are playing a Nessie plus Mothman. And then in the extra deck, of course, you see the Destiny Hero Dangerous and the Beatrice. Beyond that, I try to not change too much, so you can see kind of still that the deck is still trying to do the same things, really. One thing you will notice that's missing from this list is the Transaction Rollback. So Transaction Rollback is something that Beatrice can mill, and then in the next turn it can mill the Mayakashi Trap or Eradicator Epidemic Virus and basically auto-win on the spot. Now, the reason I'm not playing it in this build is that I noticed whenever we get hand-trapped into Oblivion, we do not get to the play. And if we don't get hand-trapped into Oblivion, our end board is an FTK anyway, so we're already winning. And going second, once again, these are bricks, just like the Shufflers. Now, one card you might also notice is missing from this list is Shayama. Some people really like to play Shayama, which is another level 6 extender from the graveyard. It can also pop your Kaleido Heart because it's a fiend. So like you have Shayama in grave, you pop Kaleido Heart comes back out, this comes out, Kaleido Heart mills something like Scream from the deck to the graveyard, adds a Sulik, and then the Shayama overlays with like the Garura or the Mali, gets you a Beatrice play. All of those plays really cool, but again, it's kind of a brick. So it's an option, it's a really powerful play, but the brick was just annoying me a little too much. Next, we have my Punk build right here. So again, we have the Teleport, Siame, and Foxytoon Deer Note package. We also have the Fusion Parasite. In the extra deck here, we have the Diabolantis going into the Zombie Vampire. Now, if you want to cut some of these cards to make room for another good Synchro 8, like the Dragite I mentioned the other time, for when you want to do like that Fenrir plus Dragite play that I was speaking of, you might be able to cut Sprint or IP or something else in this build. You will notice there's no Super Bully in the side here anymore because I couldn't find room for Garura in the extra deck anymore. There's also no room for Danger Nessie in this build, as you can see, and so that's why Garura really wasn't coming up enough for me. Beyond that, this build is really dope though. I really like it. And if you notice, there's a lot of Bestials in the format, then being able to make that early Baron might actually be more interesting sometimes than just zombie vampiring and potentially getting nuked by a Bestial. Next, we have the Pure variant. So here the idea is essentially that what if you don't use any other engines, except for, of course, you know, a small danger package, and you're just going for like Tearlaments value plus King of the Swamp, Guardian Chimera going second. You also have the Squamata, which will be extra good with the dangers. It can also be extra good as a fusion material for Guardian Chimera. It will then also chain block, which is really important. So you might go like activate polymerization, sending Squamata and some other cards to make Guardian Chimera. Then you can go chainlink 1 Guardian Chimera, chainlink 2 Squamata, and that way the Guardian Chimera cannot be negated. This is something people also did with Kelbeck and Agido before they got banned. So that chain blocking really comes up a lot, and now that we can no longer do it, this is kind of like a worse version of that. Now, another thing you see here is Armageddon Knight. This is a little spicy tech that I've been using in a lot of tier builds lately. It's basically like a shit Rhino Heart because it can send a name, but it's not the correct attribute, and it can also not send tier cash. But what it can send is Destrudo and the Shaddolls. So the way I basically see this is that I can go special summon Fenrir, add tier cash, Armageddon Knight, send Destrudo, Destrudo target Armageddon Knight, comes back as level 3, together with Fenrir makes a Baron, and then you can banish the Fenrir from your graveyard to summon tier cash, milling 3, while protected by the Baron. Then depending on your mills, of course, you can go off, but you could also then just link off the tier cash and the Armageddon Knight into IP. Now you're ending on Baron IP of nothing specifically hitting. You know, your mills can be dog shit and you still have 3 interrupts. So that's something I really like. Also, if you're drawing this later, you're just very happy. This is like just solid follow-up. And if you're bricking, you know, you can always go Armageddon Knight, send Beast, draw another card, and maybe it's good enough to keep playing. So that's why I'm trying this. I've been really liking it. Solid card. And so yeah, this is more of a pure version that might also be right up your alley. Next, we have tier cash. So like I was saying, this is that bigger Kashtira package right here. You still see me play the Armageddon Knight because now that we're playing Unicorn, we actually have way more opportunity to do the Kashtira plus Armageddon Knight play. Especially because worst case, you can still just birth, bring back Unicorn. And then you have Baron plus IP plus birth or Baron plus Unicorn plus Armageddonite plus Birth. So if you then have one more extender, you can go Baron plus Unicorn, Birth, NIP, which is a lot of interrupts actually. That's just a cute little play, assuming of course all your mills go bad. You then also notice in the extra deck the Shangri-Ira, the play I was talking about earlier, and then Big Eye for going second, really solid. So this is also something very fun to play around with, doesn't rely on the mills quite as much. You also notice I'm playing more Destrudos in here because the Baron play is going to come up way more when you have all of these level 7s. And then we have the Beast King, of course, because like I said, it's a level 4, so level 4 and 7 make the Destrudo levels perfect for Baron as well. So very fun build, this one. I definitely prefer this over the Synchro, but play whatever you like. And then we have the Synchro build right here. This is definitely a smaller Synchro package. There are definitely people playing much more Synchro heavy, but this one at least gives you those Baron plays. It can also give you the Ancient Fairy into Visa's Amritara plays, but again, there's some people playing like Samsara, Starfrost, Assault Synchron even. There's a lot of options out there. This is just the one that I gravitate towards the most. Also, we are playing a bit of a danger package here because at least, you know, you have your Nesse level 7 together with Revolution into Baron. You could argue that this should be a Jackalope, then it makes it an awful hit off Nessie, but then at least if you open only Jackalope and you hit the Jackalope with itself, you now have Nessie on board with Synchron. So you then have like 2 cards that are potentially level 7s on board for Baron rather than just the 1. I just really didn't want to play Chukinoko here because at least Mothman is a level 4, meaning the 4+3 play into Ancient Fairy into Visas that I spoke of earlier can then be done as well, whereas with Chukinoko you'd just be stuck. You also notice a Raid Salt right here because the Ancient Fairy Dragon then gets way better. You might even argue that you want to play even more Raid Salts in this variant because you want that Ancient Fairy Dragon to be as good as possible. So maybe you want to cut like a Fenrir for another copy of Raid Salt. Boy oh boy, this video is long. So if you're appreciating this type of content, you can go to zerodamagegaming.com and pick up your beautiful playmat or deck box today. All the support is very appreciated. Use the code SOLEM for a discount. Now we're gonna do a bit of a quick rundown into some other tech options without too much explanation because otherwise I will die. Tearlaments Heartbeat is awesome spell and trap removal. I am currently not playing it because it's only good going second. However, it is a good mill because it can add traps from the grave to the hand. Tearlaments Meta Noise is a okay interrupt as a trap, but it's really a solid mill to add tier names back from the graveyard to your hand because this also lets you play through Droll. I am however not playing it right now because it is a awful brick going second. Kind of the opposite problem of Heartbeat. Tearlaments Crime is a Omni-Negate that allows you to add back banished tier names, which can be great in a Bestial heavy format. It's also really solid going first, but it is awful going second. Shyama / Fiendish Rhino Warrior are both solid mills. You know, you can do the Kaleido Heart play I was talking about earlier, but I really don't like them in terms of bricking. However, they are very powerful. Bestials can be very solid depending on the format as hand traps, but they can also be really good extenders in this deck because they are level 6, meaning you can make Beatrice with them or Pilgrim Reaper. Rollback plus the Mayakashi Trap plus Eradicator Epidemic Virus, depending on the matchup, can be very solid interrupts, can be set up with Beatrice. They are really FTKs, but again, my problem is they're kind of win more. If our combo resolves, we are probably winning already. Our problem is going second into fully established boards backed up by non-engine, which these cards doesn't fix. Shinobi Necro is a cute mill if you are playing a Bestial heavy package because you can banish it and then you get it back, meaning now you can have very easy sprint access, or you can do other link plays, or you can synchro summon with it. So if you then also play Lubellion, you have a really easy Baron. If you're not playing Lubellion, you have an easy Dragite from the Bestial plus the Shinobi. So just a cute little play to consider. Nightsword Serpent is a really good mill because it will special summon itself out. It's a level 4 water, meaning you can very easily make Bahamut into Toad. Phantom Knights are darks, meaning you can make Mud Dragon with them, and they also have awesome effects in the graveyard, so they're another plussing engine. They're a little bit copium in my opinion, but I do love my cope, so you can experiment. Shufflers are an option. Again, they are awful going second, unless specific matchups where you randomly mill them and you never draw them, then I guess cool. But they are really awesome forms of interruption, and so they can still be played definitely. Hell Shadol Hollow is a cool mill but awful draw that can basically act as a weaker Agido or Kelbeck, because when it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, it will mill for the amount of attributes on the field. This means sometimes this will be a mill 2, mill 3, mill 4, mill 5, and so forth. However, the reason I'm not playing it right now is that very often when you go first, you will only have 1 attribute, maybe 2 on the board, and so too often it's a mill 1 or mill 2, and then it's not really worth a brick whenever you draw it. However, feel free to experiment. Shadol App Cologne together with Schism in the main allows you to make Winda in your opponent's turn by activating the Schism. Now, how do you actually get to the Apkallone Schism play? It's by making Grand Guignol, which sends the Apkallone from the extra deck to the graveyard. Grand Guignol can be made with Cartesia, like in Branded, but it can also be made with a King of the Swamp. King of the Swamp can simply pretend to be Cartesia, and that way you have one more interesting interrupt. If you are playing Cartesia and or Grand Guignol, you also want to consider Lulu-Wa Lilith. This card is another interrupt, so if you're gonna make the Grand Guignol anyway, you might as well get even more value out of it. The only problem is finding the extra deck space. A final card to consider, and again this is a lot of extra deck space, is Muddy Mud Dragon. Your Grand Guignol could send the Muddy Mud Dragon and this way give you a confirmed King of the Swamp. This is a way to kind of play Cartesia in the main deck, which is not as much of a brick as King of the Swamp, and then still get a King of the Swamp that way. But again, extra deck space is very tight. Visa Samsara allows us to make Vicious Astrolabe. If we play Visa Samsara in this deck as a good mill, we can essentially banish Rhino Heart plus Samsara to make Astrolabe, which is a way to go second under Dweller. And then this level 8 can also be used to make Zombie Vampire. Visa Samsara can also be a starter if you're willing to play Lightheart and Reichphobia and Reichheart and Arrival, or as a smaller engine with Lightheart and Reichphobia and a Visa Starfrost. This way you could make a Cross Sheep together with an Astrolabe and then revive something back and do all kinds of cute little plays, get yourself a Zombie Vampire set up, whilst also going second a fair bit better, because that Samsara being milled is way better than an Imseti being milled, because it can make Astrolabe, which is just crazy going second. Honestly, it's like half the reason Vanadium can go second at all. The Adventurer Engine is something I actually really like. Water Enchantress is an insanely powerful mill. It gives you free Omni Negate, free Disruption, and so forth. The main issue with it is that we don't actually have the monster zones. Like, Tearlaments can easily fill our entire board, and so Adventure Engine taking 2 slots is just a lot. For that reason, I'm not playing it right now, but if we see even more hits to this deck and you still want to play this deck, that might be another option as a solid mill. Fateful Adventure can also send cards from the hand to the graveyard for effect, so you could trigger Scream, Sulik, and Tearlaments names. The Mekanko Engine can make an easy Beatrice. Therions can be really solid mill payoff, and they can also help you make rank 8s like Zombie Vampire. The Lunalight Engine helps you make Bujintei, which is a rank 4 that allows you to mill 5, kind of like the Yugioh and Kelbeck was doing previously. The Lunalight Engine can also help you make even more rank 4s and crazy link plays like that. There are also incredible mills. The main reason I'm not playing them right now is Droll is going to be in the format, and Lunalight loses hard to Droll. They're also not that great going second. If you can't get going, you play a number of bricks for them, and so they're kind of like a magnifying glass. They make the good parts about tier even better, while making the bad parts about tier even worse. However, it is definitely a possibility that this ends up being a viable engine. Card Destruction is a cute little tech, because whenever you have a hand full of good mills but bad draws, it will basically act as if it's an Yugioh or a Kelbeck. The only issue is you might make your opponent's hand better, maybe give them like extra power from their graveyard, and whenever your hand is actually good, maybe it's full of gas, you don't actually want to activate a Card Destruction, so then it's kind of a brick. That said, it's still a really powerful starter, and if you notice you don't have enough starters, Card Destruction is absolutely incredible in this deck. Reasoning is mostly bad Card Destruction. I've tried it a lot, I like it whenever it goes crazy, but too often your opponent just says 7, and then you just feel really bad. There's not that many good hits you can find if people know to call 7 on Reasoning. Rainbow Bridge and Emerald Tortoise is really cute. Rainbow Bridge can essentially be a more powerful Trivikarma because it can add you a free +1, but it cannot add you Scream or Sulik, so more powerful is maybe not fully true. However, what is really cool about it is that this Emerald Tortoise can be an aqua for Kaleido Heart and also a really good discard for your Horus Engine, because the Horus Engine does eat through your hand a fair bit. Finally, Tearlaments can also be a small engine inside a big Branded Fusion deck. Branded Fusion becoming even more powerful disruption through Perler Rhino, whilst also getting even more fusions through those names being sent as the dark part for your Lubellion plays, is pretty powerful, and it can also be even more follow-up for the deck. So now that Kashtira Arise Heart is no longer in the format, and maybe Shifter isn't in the format, again depending on what's going on, we might see Branded with a tiny tier engine do pretty well. Now for the extra deck, we have Typhon. This card is amazing at breaking boards. It's also really useful that it takes the highest attack monster from your field, because sometimes you will have a tier name on board, or tier cash. It will probably be smaller attack, and you will probably have Scream and or Sulik if you failed to break the board but went through mostly. So then Typhon actually takes away a non-tier card from your board, something like a Fenrir, removes the threat, acts as a floodgate, and then in your opponent's turn, you can start milling again. Pilgrim Reaper, like said earlier, is a cute rank 6 play that mills 5. Cross Sheep allows us to add a whole lot of ceiling to our combos. Underworld Goddess is a really good way to get rid of towers, and Tearlaments tends to be able to put up a lot of bodies. Dweller can be good if it's a Dweller format, and Tearlaments makes so many level 4s, it's really easy to make. Wallow is solid if you're already playing a rank 6 deck. This card can OTK really well, it can get rid of towers because it's so big. Winda is a cute fusion that sometimes auto wins the game. Zeus is really solid removal, and we can make rank 4s and rank 6s really easily, so sometimes it is a good option. It can also trigger all of our Tearlaments cards because they would be sent to the graveyard by effect. The Cherubini Draco Sack line is cope. I've tried it many times, overlaying 2 level 7s to make a Draco Sack, then Draco Sack makes 2 level 3s, those 2 level 3s make Cherubini, then the Cherubini sends the King of the Swamp, then the Cherubini plus the Draco Sack makes Sprint, Sprint sends Merly, Merly plus King of the Swamp into Rule Colossus. It is just so much extra deck space for a very, very weak play. Shooting Riser Dragon can be a level 7 that we make very easily with Testrudo, and can then also send our Keldo or Medora. Maybe we then only play 1, at least that way we have a confirmed shuffler without having to play 2, and then it becomes level 3 itself, so then it could make a Baron with a level 7. And that is basically all of the decks I could think of right now. How about we now try to do a test hand so you can actually see how this deck can still play right now, even without Yugioh and Kelbeck. So let's shuffle up this baby. I hope this hand is not a brick. That way you can see that tier never dies. And again, look at this beautiful playmat. ZeroDamageGaming.com. Use the code Solemn. There's also deck boxes of this. There's also the mat with only this. There's the mat with only this. There's also other options, of course, if you want to check out some more. So let's check out this hand. We have Tier Cash, Perla Rhino, Tier Cash, Imseti, and Rhino. This is good. So in this hand, I would always start with Imseti because I only play 1 Sark in this list. And also I'm afraid of Droll. So I'm going to throw this away and then Imseti gets Sark. Again, we're going to pretend like we don't get interrupted here. Now we're going to draw 1 card. It's an Armageddon Knight. Now in this case, since we have Rhino Heart already, I'm not going to use the Armageddon Knight, but depending on the hand, it might be cool. So we're then going to special summon out the Horus. And the reason we already special summon it out is because if we now discard for King Sark and they have Ogre, we now have no value. Whereas if we discard now and they Ogre, at least we got the Horus. Again, Ogre is not necessarily played, but it's something you have to consider. So then King Sark sends Happy, then Happy comes out, and we overlay that into this zone to Zombie Vampire. Now the reason for this zone placement is that we will very often use all of these, and we will very often link off the Zombie Vampire into IP or SP. So for that reason, that zone placement is very ideal. Now we activate Zombie Vampire, and Armageddon Knight being in our grave means we don't have to send Imseti, but I will still send Imseti now, just to show you that that's generally ideal, because if we find a Rhino Heart right here, and we want to be able to fuse with the Imseti the Dark, because it will make Mud Dragon, and a Mud Dragon plus Rhino makes Bahamut into Toad. So we mill 4, Trivic Karma, Sharon, Rhino, and Beast King. This is incredible. I mean, you saw me shuffle. I have not done anything. So we will summon the Rhino, and then we will go Chainlink 2 Sharon, Chainlink 1 Rhino. So then our Sharon and our Beast King will go into Rule Colossus, and then Rhino will send Halfness. Now the reason why you always want to send Halfness here is because Merly can still be done with Sprint. So if our opponent stops all of our fusions for some reason, we want the Sprint target last, because that way we can always still make the Sprint. Now in this situation, I will fuse with Armageddon Knight because it is a better top deck than the Imseti. And also the Imseti being engraved means it's better follow-up. If we now fuse with this away and we don't mill for some reason, we don't mill it again, at least now it's still engraved for our Sark. So we're going to send these 2 into Mud Dragon, then these 2 into Bahamut, and then affect Bahamut into Toad. Notice that I summoned Bahamut here because it means that all our good stuff is outside of relinquished anima zones, which is very important in this format because Rescue Ace, Fire King, and Pearly can all play anima. So again, Rule Colossus and Toad are safe. Bahamut isn't, but who cares? Now, to make room, I will link these off into IP. Now, if we had no other plays, this already would be really solid. We would have an Omni Negate, Special Summon Negate, the Toad would bring back the Tier Cash. Then in our opponent's turn, we would summon the Tier Cash and then IP plus Tier Cash into SP, banish, and then SP is another banish. So that's already a ton. But we're not done yet. So we're going to send Trivic Karma, banish it, search for Scream. Now this might be a bit greedy because we could search Sulik and just confirm Sulik access. but I'm greedy, so fuck it. Burla Rhino searches our Sharon. Burla Rhino is right here. Next, we will play Scream, and we will activate Sharon. Now here, I will send Rhino Heart because I want to be able to still summon Tear Cache in case we have Destrudo, because then we have Baron. So Sharon, again, in this zone, because anything useful we make has to be here. So it sends Rhino, and then it's gonna mill 3 from her effect. 1, there we go, Destrudo. 2, Grief, that's too bad. 3, Sulik. And then we activate... Here it kind of depends. You could activate Rhino to bring it back, and then chain Tear Cache, and both will still summon out. But then you will notice we will miss the zones for Destrudo, because you will have Rhino, Tear Cache, and no Destrudo, so that's bad. So instead, I will keep the Rhino here, and I will only activate Scream. So 1, 3. Okay, so we hit nothing, kind of sad. So now we will activate the Tear Cache. We can just banish the Grief, because it's not that useful anymore. And again, in this zone, because we want to keep these safe from Anima. Tear Cache effect, 1. Shadol Beast effect, cool. We will draw 1. So we have a Goods. That's cool. Goods could send our Scream, and then give us Sulik access. So now we will activate Destrudo, targeting Sharon. It will come out. Now it's a level 3. So now Destrudo plus Tear Cache, 7 and 3, makes Baron. Luckily, our draw was really good and we had the Goods. So we're gonna activate Goods, send Scream, then Scream effect can add Sulik. If we didn't have Goods, we could still Baron pop Scream from our field and that way add Sulik. But since we were crazy and our beast drew Goods, we now have both, which is extra good because that means on our opponent's turn we still have the mills. So now we set our Sulik. So this is an FTK. Again, we were not interrupted, so we make FTKs. That's how the deck works. If you want to count the interrupts, we have Baron as an Omni negate. We have Toad as an Omni negate. We have a special summon negate. We have Scream reducing the attack so they can't OTK probably. Then Toad will, when it's sent, add Tear Cache back. Tear Cache will be summoned. Mill 3. Again, more stuff could happen. IP plus this Tear Cache will make the SP. SP will banish. And then afterwards, its other effect will also banish if you want. We have a Sulik, which is a monster negate, which sends Sharon. And then Sharon plus this Toad, plus this Rhino Heart will make Kaleido Heart, which will also be a shuffle. So this is an FTK. People are not breaking this board. And this is the first test hand I just did, by the way. So this was the Tearlaments Encyclopedia. I hope you enjoyed. My voice is dying. I hope you appreciate the work regardless. I love Tearlaments. Tearlaments strongest. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.